Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious. Campers of Reddit, what was the most bone-chilling thing you've seen or experienced while in the woods? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was in Cub Scouts in the UK, so somewhere between 8 and 10, we went on a camping trip. Nothing too crazy, just a campsite with some woodland nearby. In the evening, we were sent out to look for some green sticks in the woodland for roasting marshmallows over the fire. Great, I thought, and went off on my own looking for the perfect stick. I probably wasn't more than 20 meters from the campsite, but I felt like I was deep in the woods and alone, but I wasn't worried. I was just on the lookout for a stick for my marshmallow. I was scanning the ground, seeing what I could find when I heard a noise. I looked up to see someone step out from behind a tree wearing a full-face gas mask. I literally just collapsed onto the ground screaming in terror. I read a lot of my dad's books as a kid and was brought up on a diet of Tom Clancy, Michael Crichton, and the like. In my mind, I was convinced that there was some kind of chemical attack and I was going to die there in those woods. I just curled up in a ball on the floor crying until someone found me. I think it was just a teenager effing with the kids from the Cubs, but in that moment, it was awful. Still the most fear I've ever felt. I spent the rest of the evening crying on the lap of one of the leaders. I never did find a stick for my marshmallow either. Not the woods, but my brother and I had been camping and surfing the same Virgin Cove in Baja California, 6 miles off the nearest highway for about 4 years without ever encountering anybody but the occasional surfer or campers who knew about the cove as well. The nearest town is 13 miles away, taking the 4 into consideration. Always had pleasant conversations and shared beers and food on many occasions with them and had a blast. 2 years ago, we were alone and were having a great time at the fire pit we built, blasting music and getting drunk at about 2 a.m. We see a figure in the distance walking toward us. Guns are illegal here in Mexico, so all we had was an AutoZone knife and a wood axe, and we sat down each, holding one of those, looking at the figure getting closer and closer. Nothing but moonlight, so we couldn't make out any features except a baseball cap. 10 minutes later, we realize it's a dude who looks dirty as F and is walking like he's drunk. He gets to our camp, and we can tell he's high off his mind in some chemical shit and smells like a homeless person does. He immediately says hello when he gets to us and starts rambling incoherently about the beach and asks for food and beer. We give him some and try to make awkward small talk while staying friendly but on guard at all times, and the conversation comes to a screeching halt when he looks my brother in the eye and says, "You know, you're so far from town. You guys could get killed and nobody would find you for days." We stand up straight and show the knife and axe and tell him to get the hell away from us. He starts laughing and walking into the distance, eating what food we gave him, and in the distance, we see cop lights getting close at an incredible speed for a dirt road. Mexican cops drive F-150s in this area. We lost sight of him from watching the cop cars speed through the dirt road heading toward us, and when they stop at our camp, they ask if we saw a guy matching the description. We point them in the direction he walked away into. They speed through rough terrain, and in the distance, we see them get out and throw the guy to the ground, yelling and pointing their rifles at him, and they put him in the back of one of the trucks and leave. We got the F out of there and spent the last 2 days of our trip at a motel at that town. Switched surf spot ever since and have no idea what happened or who he was. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I loved to night hike alone before I was married and loved to go to the certain remote area where I live after crazy work days. It is about a 3-mile walk. Multiple times over the course of a year-ish, I would hear what I thought were whispers, only while sitting at this overlook. Here on this spot, on clear nights with the moon out, you could see so many mountains and trees, and nothing man-made as far as you can see. It was my favorite place to go. It was beautiful. I almost never used my flashlight because once your eyes acclimate to the moonlight, you can see better without them. Anyway, I would try not to let my mind wander whenever I would think that I was hearing something out of the ordinary, like those whispering. I always kept my mind solid and thinking of relaxing subjects and so on. There were 2 especially memorable nights out in the bush. It was into autumn. The leaves were falling in full force. I was almost in my favorite spot. It must have been around 11 p.m. I was walking uphill towards the overlook when I heard leaves crunching. It sounded near, but I couldn't estimate which direction. There are huge boulders nearby, and as I passed them, I heard small rocks crumbling from them. Again, it was indistinct, very strange sounding, metallic sounding, hard to describe. Immediately gave me the shivers. Something strange is happening. I thought I should leave now. I had my flashlight on at this point, ignoring my normal no light rule. It's a 1,000 lumen beast of a light. I'm heading back, and just in the periphery cone of my light, I see a shadowy blip, like a dark, hazy, smoky moving shadow. Caught like half a second of it, and it was gone. It didn't leave away from me. The haze was there. Then went transparent, then disappeared. I remember just when I was telling myself that it was nothing, I heard leaves crunching in the same direction, moving irregularly, fast, fast, slow, fast, slow, slow, something like that. About 15 feet to my left, I ran about half a mile to the junction before collecting myself and nervously listening behind me all the way to the car. The second time was with my future wife in the same area of the overlook. It was the last time I went night hiking. After 2 years later, everything was cool the whole night, except right before we were getting up to walk back to the car. I thought I heard those whispers again, but was not sure. I didn't say anything to her because I didn't want to scare her for no reason. My imagination, right? She stopped talking to me as she abruptly stopped walking. Shh, do you hear that? What? I replied, getting goosebumps. I heard something, almost like muffled talking, like there's a conversation nearby. My heart rate was elevating. We were about 3 miles from the trailhead on protected forest land, only the stars and moonlight visible. She grasped my hand tightly. We walked about 10 yards when she squeals like I'd never heard her before. She starts running, pulling me along, swearing. We keep running, our lights on now. We stop after some time. She has tears in her eyes. I ask what is wrong. I heard it very faintly. I heard my name. Cue the holy shit. Pro tip. If hiking along in the woods at night and you hear disembodied voices that you can't find the origin of, you should probably finish that hike. I was camping alone on Vancouver Island a number of years ago. I believe it was a weekday, as the camping area had no one else around. I hear an odd rustling off in the distance. Don't think too much of it, continue enjoying my fire. Then the most horrifying noise I've ever heard happens next. It sounded like a baby screaming. Not a crying baby, but the most unnerving banshee wail. One of the few times it'd been overcome with pure fear, and I quickly run to my car, was on a road trip. Needless to say, I slept in my car that night. Obviously, nothing happened, and I most certainly did not go to investigate. Later I found out that it's a noise female cougars make during mating season. Look it up. It's the most awful noise. Went camping with a group of friends about 5 years ago. We went for a walk along a trail, then decided we would leave the path and try to climb to the top of a large hill. We walked for about an hour, having a blast. Next thing I remember, the guy in the lead just stops dead in his tracks. There were 3 unmarked graves dug in the middle of nowhere. One was about my size, 6'1", and 2 were smaller. They didn't look recent. We took a couple of photos and hurried back to the campsite. We were all talking about what else that could possibly be when a ranger came to collect camping fees. Told them about it and tried to describe where we were. Gave them all our details and never heard about it again. I still think about it every now and then. A friend contacted the local police on the way home, but it was almost impossible to clearly tell them where we were. Picture a hungover 19-year-old saying, leave the campsite and walk towards one of the hills for about an hour. My family owns a ranch in the middle of the woods, and I would spend summers helping them work at it and just generally hanging out. One year they invited me to come spend Christmas with them, so I went back to see the place in the snowfall. I was about 10, so I loved roaming around in the woods by the house any chance I got. So it's snowing, dark, everything is still, and it feels like the perfect night to go for a nice walk in the woods. The moon is bright, so I don't bring a flashlight and head out. I got to the point where I was out of sight of the house when the quiet snow silence is broken by this creaking, like something hanging. It's coming in several directions, so I can't figure out where to look for the noise, but I continue walking. Finally, I come around the tree and come face to face with the skull at my height. I scream and start running, only to run straight into another one of those things hanging from the trees. It's white, but there's blood, and I don't stick around long enough to figure out what it is. I book it back to the house screaming that there are dead bodies in the woods, and my cousins immediately start laughing at me. Turns out, a few sheep had died recently. 1 was a dog attack, 2 were because they were old, and since the ground was too cold to bury them, they hung them in the trees for the winter so as to not attract coyotes. Still, even in the daytime, seeing those bodies hanging from trees was freaking creepy. And it didn't help that 2 years after that, I ran into a bone display where someone had laid out the remains of a deer to make the body point at a twisted, dead tree. If I had some sheep carcasses strung up in the woods of my property, I might tell my guests about it. Might. Me and a few friends decided to go for a hike into the mountains. We live pretty rurally, so really almost any mountain is remote. We walked for about 2 hours through some poorly maintained walking trails and discovered a super eerie, out-of-place scene. There was a clearing in the brush, not far from the trail, with 4 blue tarps. On top of the tarps were blue and gray barrels. We decided to kick over one of them, and at first water came spilling out of it, followed by at least 100 cell phones, pagers, and Blackberries, scattered in with some shoes. We opened up and knocked over the rest of them, and every one was the same. Phones, shoes, and water, except one. One of the barrels was full of a chemical, almost rubbing alcohol-esque liquid, and at the bottom of it, a few more badly decayed phones. No idea what the hell it was. We thought it could have been an illegal dumping site, or somewhere to hide evidence, or maybe just something weirder. We had a few theories, but none of them really seemed to stick or make sense. We tried to find it a second time a few days later, and we all swore up and down that we were in the same spot, but eerily enough, everything was gone. The only thing indicating it was the same spot were the strands of tarp left in the grass. Camping alone, woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of it, large dog barking at my tent. Spent the first half hour terrified the shepherd would come. Instead, the dog is calling its mates. Suddenly, 2 dogs are barking, and I can hear a third one responding from further away. Realize these are probably wild dogs. They've been here for over an hour now. I'm frantically Googling how to fight dogs. Turns out, it's not great to start on my knees. Now I'm wishing a shepherd or someone would come and find me. I have a whistle and a tactical lamp on me, so I set the lamp in SOS mode and start whistling like crazy, hoping to attract somebody. Dogs stop barking and presumably leave after a while. I assume the whistling was really uncomfortable for them. Spent the rest of the night terrified they'll come back, but also too exhausted to pack up and leave. I grew up in the rivers bottoms of East Texas. There's nothing particularly pretty or pleasant about being out there. It's just away from everything, and fishing and hunting can be really, really good. It is also an effing creepy place if you're out there at the right time of the year. The river bottoms flood in the spring, so in late summer fall, everything is a uniform dried mud brown. Most of the trees are uniformly smallish, 4 to 10 inches, and you can walk for hours, and it would still look exactly like the area outside of your campsite. Very easy to get lost. When I was around 9 or 10, on a camping trip with my family, my uncle got turned around while out hunting. We had specific whistles that we would use to communicate our location with others and help locate ourselves when we were out in the woods, but he didn't realize he was turned around until he walked out of earshot. He was found 3 days later, almost 20 miles from where we were camping. He had crossed a river and 2 highways, but didn't remember any of it. Complete panic. I was in the truck with my dad when we went to pick him up on the side of the road, surrounded by state troopers. He just bawled and blubbered all the way back to his house. It made a huge impact on me, and I've had a fear of getting lost in the woods ever since. Okay, fast forward 25 years. I'm camping with my wife, her parents, and my 3-year-old daughter in the middle of nowhere in the Smoky Mountains. My in-laws offered to watch the kid so that my wife and I could go on a hike. Not long into the hike, I went back for my camera and found my 3-year-old wandering through the woods by herself about 50 yards away from camp. I wouldn't have heard her if she hadn't been singing to herself. Now, I had previously expressed reservations about leaving her with my sometimes absent-minded in-laws after previous incidents, one of which led to a trip to the ER, where I didn't feel like they kept a close enough eye on her, but it had always turned into a huge fight with my wife, so I didn't press it. Because of this, I scooped up my kid and took her with me on the hike with my wife without making a big deal out of it, or letting my in-laws know that I was taking her with me. We get back to camp about 4 hours later. I came up with an excuse to pause with my daughter before we're back in view of the camp because I wanted to see how her parents would react in our return. They were both sitting next to the tent reading books, not a care in the world. They didn't realize that anything was wrong until I walked back carrying my kid. Huge fight. My wife, who wasn't previously aware of how I found our daughter, completely flipped out on them. We packed up then and there, hiked back to the road, and drove the 15 hours back home that day. It took my wife several weeks before she calmed down enough to explain to them without screaming why it was such a problem. It's been 5 years, and I still get angry about it when I think about it. There's not much to say about this post except in-laws. Am I right? I'm right. I went to visit my cousins in rural New York recently, and they're in like deep backwoods New York. The closest neighbors are a mile away, and the property is basically cut into the woods and super hilly. I'm from Texas, and it's not like that at all, obviously. And one night we were all on the back porch hanging out, and my cousin was playing hurt animal noises on a loudspeaker to try and get some wolves to howl, and also howling noises to provoke them. Around 12 to 1 a.m., they all went to bed, and I wanted to think about random stuff, so I just sat outside on the back porch, still enjoying the night. Eventually, I just start walking towards the back of the property. Their backyard is like a football field wide and about 1,500 feet long. As I'm halfway, I just hear something along the tree line growl, and I effing froze when I realized what we were doing earlier, and also realized I was not the apex predator out here. I ran back towards the house and did not look back until I was inside. I was white as a ghost. It was probably nothing, but I was not risking it. Not so much creepy, but bone-chilling in hindsight. I volunteer as a youth group, and every summer we go out camping with the kids. Often there will also be a spooky, scary night when we set up something of a haunted house, but along a dark forest path. 2 years ago, we found an abandoned military compound, storage and ammunition with a few garages. Now, this area was completely overgrown by trees and high grass, with the compound rusted and old. Effing jackpot, this is going to be so creepy. That was when we found a small structure with a metal sliding door, which opened with a long, terribly eerie screeching. We decided to make that a feature in the trail and continue setting it up. This was around late afternoon. We return, get a campfire going, and hype up the kids with scary stories. Awesome. We take them back to the compound in the middle of the night, and it is effing terrifying. Several kids outright refused, but the few wanted to prove their bravado. So we take them along the trail, where several others are positioned at key spots. There was someone in dark clothing just standing in the woods, just concealed by the darkness, that ran away when we got near with our oil lantern. Eventually, we hear the metal door screech open and screech shut again. The kids are shivering in their shoes, and me and my buddy as well. It was the height of the evening. We return to the fire, and the kids are all claiming they weren't even scared. We ask who did the sliding door thing, and everybody just looks around. Similarly, nobody had run from us when we approached. So we did some asking around, and apparently it's a place where people come to shoot up, and we took a group of kids to it. Yeah. Was hiking for an early morning deer hunt, armed, in hunter orange, in heavy clothes because freaking cold enough using a bandana to breathe. Found my spot on the hillside, started to snuggle in while keeping eyes wide in the little pre-dawn light, just looking for movement, being quiet, breathing slow and even and listening, head on a slow pivot, which is the only reason I discovered a mountain lion near me. I caught a glimpse of his hot, breathing plume. Just a glimpse, but it was evaporating, so it caught my eye. Looked again, then stayed there, letting details come out. Still not yet sunrise. Finally realized a big old mountain lion was focused on me, breathing, just standing there, tail barely moving. I can't say I know enough about big cats to know whether he was just watching me or actively hunting me, but it freaked me out. Yes, I had a good rifle. Yes, I'm a good shot with it, but it's still a single shot 30-06, and it's freaking cold. My hands are still in thick gloves. Didn't really think. Just stood up tall and started waving my arms and screaming. He looked for a minute, then turned and disappeared. I was too freaked to continue by myself. Didn't want to hunt while letting it sneak up on me, so called it a morning.